Before I tell you this story, I need you to understand something about fire lookouts in Alaska. Most people think the job is romantic, living alone in a tower surrounded by wilderness, watching for smoke, protecting the forest. And maybe in the lower 48, in places like Montana or Oregon, that's somewhat accurate. But Alaska is different. The distances are vast, the isolation is absolute, and the winter, the winter changes everything. Drop a comment and let me know if you've ever been to Alaska, worked a solitary job, or spent a winter completely alone. And if this is your first time on this channel, hit that subscribe button, because what I'm about to tell you is why the Forest Service pays fire lookouts in Alaska's interior $47,000 for a 6-month winter rotation, plus a $15,000 completion bonus. They pay that much because most lookouts don't make it through the winter. Because there are things in the Alaskan wilderness that don't follow the rules of nature you learned in biology class. And because the 7 rules posted in every lookout tower aren't suggestions, they're the difference between surviving until spring and becoming another missing person statistic that the Forest Service quietly closes without explanation. My name is David Mercer, and I spent 6 months as the winter fire lookout at Tower 9 in the Alaskan interior, about 240 miles northwest of Fairbanks. That's 9 months ago now. I'm still processing what happened up there, still trying to understand what I encountered during those long, dark months when the sun barely rose above the horizon and the temperature dropped to 40 below zero. I should start by explaining what a winter fire lookout actually does, because most people don't even know the position exists. During summer, fire lookouts in Alaska watch for wildfires, lightning strikes that ignite the tinder-dry boreal forest, or human-caused fires from campers and vehicles. But in winter, when snow covers everything and temperatures plunge, winter fires aren't the concern. Winter lookouts have a different job. We monitor weather patterns, watch for illegal activity in protected wilderness areas, maintain communication networks for search and rescue operations, and, though this isn't in the official job description, we watch for other things that only appear when the darkness comes, things that the Forest Service doesn't officially acknowledge but knows are out there. I found out about the Tower 9 position through a friend who'd worked for the Forest Service. I was between jobs, recently divorced, looking for something completely different from my previous life as an insurance adjuster in Seattle. The ad was brief: Winter Fire Lookout, Interior Alaska, 6-month contract, October through March, remote posting, limited contact with civilization, must be comfortable with extreme isolation and harsh conditions, competitive salary plus completion bonus. The interview was conducted over video call with a Forest Service supervisor named Margaret Chen, a woman in her 60s who'd clearly spent decades in Alaska. Her office wall was covered with maps of the interior, each one marked with dozens of small flags. Tower 9, she said without preamble. You understand this is complete isolation. The nearest road is 60 miles. The nearest town is 140 miles. You'll be resupplied by bush plane every 6 weeks, weather permitting. There's no internet, limited radio contact, and if something goes wrong, help might not reach you for days. I understand, I said. I'm looking for solitude, time to think, to reset. Everyone says that. She pulled out a folder. In the last 15 years, we've had 23 people take winter postings at Tower 9.
Of those, 7 completed the full 6-month rotation. The others requested early extraction, citing various reasons: equipment failure, medical issues, personal emergencies. But you know what's interesting? When we investigate these equipment failures or medical issues, we rarely find anything objectively wrong. What does that mean? It means Tower 9 has a reputation. The local Athabascan people won't go near it. Bush pilots will resupply but won't stay on the ground longer than necessary. Previous lookouts report unusual experiences, sounds that shouldn't be possible, sightings of things that don't match any known wildlife, psychological pressure that builds over time. You're trying to scare me off? I'm trying to prepare you. She slid a document across. Visible on my screen was what looked like a set of guidelines. These are the Tower 9 protocols, 7 rules that every lookout is required to follow. They're not optional, and they're not suggestions. Follow them exactly, and you'll probably be fine. Deviate from them and, well, you won't be the first to request emergency extraction. Can I see the rules? She held up the document so I could read it on camera. Tower 9 Winter Protocols. Rule 1. Never leave the tower between sunset and sunrise regardless of circumstances. If you hear something outside at night, ignore it. Rule 2. The radio operates on Channel 7 for official communications. Never switch to Channel 13 even if you hear transmissions there. Rule 3. If you see lights moving through the forest at night, close all shutters and do not look at them until they pass. Rule 4. Food must be stored in the underground cache, not in the tower. Check the cache every 3 days, but never at night. Rule 5. The trail to the cache runs directly north for exactly 200 yards. If the trail appears to fork or diverge, return to the tower immediately without investigating. Rule 6. Do not respond to knocking on the tower door unless you've received radio confirmation of a supply delivery. Even then, confirm the pilot's voice matches their identification. Rule 7. If you see your own footprints in the snow leading away from the tower, but you haven't left the tower, stay inside and radio for immediate extraction. I stared at the rules, reading them 3 times. Is this some kind of hazing? Psychological testing? I wish it were. Margaret's expression was grim. These rules were developed over 40 years and multiple incidents. Some of them are based on experiences that resulted in lookout deaths or disappearances. They work, David. We don't know why they work, but they do. Can you commit to following them exactly? Something about her tone convinced me this wasn't a joke. Yes, I can follow them. Good. One more thing. She pulled up another document. You'll need to review the previous lookout's logs. Pay special attention to the entries from last winter. The lookout before you, Thomas Garrett, lasted 4 months before requesting extraction. His final log entries are concerning, but they'll give you an idea of what to expect. She sent me the digital files, and I spent the next 3 days reading through decades of Tower 9 logs. Most were mundane. Weather observations, wildlife sightings, maintenance notes, but interspersed throughout were entries that made my skin crawl. November 14th, 1987, Keeper William Morrison. Heard what sounded like a child crying in the forest at 2 a.m., followed protocol and did not investigate. Sound continued for 3 hours, then stopped abruptly. No children within 200 miles of this location. January 3rd, 1994, Keeper James Sullivan. Lights in the forest again, blue-white moving in formation. They approached within 50 yards of the tower base. I closed shutters per protocol. Could hear something circling the tower for approximately 2 hours. When I opened shutters at dawn, found large tracks in snow around tower base. Tracks don't match any known species. Reported to Supervisor Chen, who documented but offered no explanation. February 19th, 2003, Keeper Robert Chen. Channel 13 active again. Voice asking for help, claiming to be lost hiker. Voice knew my name. How does it know my name? Did not respond per protocol. Radio went silent after 45 minutes. December 8th, 2015, Keeper Sarah Mitchell. Woke at 3 a.m. to knocking on tower door. Rhythmic, patient. Continued for 20 minutes. No radio confirmation of supply delivery. Did not open door. Knocking stopped. In morning, found no footprints in snow around tower except my own from yesterday's cache check. But Thomas Garrett's final entries from last winter were the most disturbing. March 8th, 2024. I can't do this anymore. It knows I'm here. It's been circling the tower every night for 2 weeks. I can hear it on the stairs sometimes, testing the door. The locks hold, but I don't know for how long. Whatever this thing is, it's getting bolder. I'm requesting extraction as soon as weather permits. March 10th, 2024. Extraction delayed due to storm. 3 more days minimum. I can make it 3 more days. I have to make it 3 more days. Last night, it spoke. Used my dead brother's voice. Called my name. I almost opened the door. Almost. But I remembered the protocols. Rule 6 saved me. March 12th, 2024. Final entry. Extraction confirmed for tomorrow morning. I'm not crazy. I know what I've experienced was real. To whoever comes after me, follow the rules exactly. Do not deviate even once. Do not try to understand what's out there. Just follow the rules and count the days until spring. Good luck. You'll need it. Garrett's logs ended there. When I asked Margaret about him, she said he'd completed his extraction, collected his bonus, and immediately quit the Forest Service. He'd refused to discuss his experiences beyond what was in his logs. I should have walked away then. Should have recognized the pattern. Intelligent people, experienced outdoorsmen, all requesting early extraction or barely completing their rotations. All describing experiences that sounded like psychological breakdown or shared delusion. But I didn't walk away. Maybe because the money was good. Maybe because I needed the isolation and convinced myself the previous lookouts had just cracked under the pressure of solitude. Maybe because some part of me was curious about what could scare experienced outdoorsmen that badly. So I signed the contract. The bush plane dropped me at Tower 9, right as the Alaskan interior was transitioning into winter. The pilot, a grizzled guy in his 60s named Frank, circled the tower twice before landing on a small cleared strip about a quarter-mile away. Tower 9 rose from a rocky outcrop in the middle of endless boreal forest, a 50-foot steel structure with the cab at the top, accessible by an external staircase that spiraled around the tower. At the base was a small equipment shed and the entrance to the underground cache where supplies were stored. Frank helped me unload 6 months of supplies: food, fuel for the generator, spare parts, winter clothing, books, and emergency equipment. He worked quickly, efficiently, like he wanted to finish and leave. "You read the protocols?" he asked as we carried the last boxes into the cache. "Yeah, Margaret made sure I understood them." "Good. Follow them exactly." He glanced at the forest surrounding us. It was 4 p.m. and the sun was already low on the horizon. I've been flying supplies to Tower 9 for 20 years, seen a lot of lookouts come and go. The ones who last are the ones who treat those rules like gospel. The ones who don't, well, I usually end up flying them out early with that look in their eyes. You know the look. The one that says they've seen something that broke their understanding of how the world works. "What is out there, Frank, really?" He was quiet for a long moment, loading the last supplies. "I don't know exactly, but I'll tell you this. The Athabascan elders have stories about this area. They call it Go-Dees, the place where the world is thin. They say in certain spots the boundary between our world and something else gets weak. Things can cross over, things that don't belong here." He closed the cache door. "Could be superstition, could be something else, but I've seen those lights in the forest from the air, seen things moving down there that don't match any animal I know. So I take the protocols seriously, and I suggest you do too." He flew out 20 minutes later, leaving me alone as the sun set over the infinite expanse of spruce and tamarack forest. The silence was profound. No traffic sounds, no human voices, no aircraft. Just wind in the trees and the occasional crack of branches adjusting to the dropping temperature. I climbed the tower stairs to the cab, my new home for the next 6 months.
It was surprisingly cozy, about 12 feet square, with windows on all sides providing 360-degree views of the forest. There was a small wood stove, a bunk bed, a desk with radio equipment, shelves for supplies, and basic cooking facilities. The whole structure swayed slightly in the wind, a reminder that I was perched 50 feet above the ground on a steel frame. The protocols were posted on the wall next to the radio, printed on laminated cardstock that looked like it had been replaced many times. Tower 9 Winter Protocols. Follow exactly. I read them again, trying to find some rational explanation for rules that sounded like superstition. But after reading the previous logs, after Frank's warning, I decided I'd follow them regardless. What was the harm in being cautious? That first night, I kept all the windows open, watching the sunset paint the forest in shades of orange and purple. The temperature dropped quickly after dark, from 30 degrees at sunset to 15 degrees by 8 p.m. I fired up the wood stove, made dinner from my supplies, and tried to settle into my new routine. Around 10 p.m., I heard the first unusual sound. Footsteps on the tower stairs. I froze, listening. The metallic clang of boots on steel steps, ascending slowly, methodically. Someone or something was climbing toward me. Rule 6 flashed through my mind. Do not respond to knocking on the tower door unless you've received radio confirmation of a supply delivery. But this wasn't knocking. This was someone climbing, and I hadn't had any radio confirmation of anything. The footsteps continued, getting closer. I could track them by sound. They'd reached the third landing, then the fourth, spiraling up toward me. Each step echoed in the cold night air. I grabbed the radio.
This is Tower 9, calling base. Do I have any incoming traffic? Over. Static. Then Margaret's voice. Negative, Tower 9. No traffic scheduled. Is there a problem? Over. I'm hearing footsteps on the tower stairs. Someone's climbing up. Over. A long pause. Tower 9, confirm you've reviewed all protocols. Over. Confirmed. But this is footsteps, not knocking. The rule doesn't... Rule 1, David. Never leave the tower between sunset and sunrise, regardless of circumstances. If you hear something outside at night, ignore it. Over. But ignore it. Do not open the door. Do not look out the windows at the stairs. Stay inside and wait. It will pass. Over and out. The radio went silent, and the footsteps continued, reaching the final landing, right outside my door. Then, knocking. Slow, rhythmic, patient. Knock, knock, knock. I stood frozen in the center of the cab, staring at the door. The wood stove crackled. Wind moved through the trees far below, and something knocked on my door with the patience of something that could wait forever. Rule 6. Do not respond to knocking unless you've received radio confirmation. I had not received confirmation, so I waited. The knocking continued for 20 minutes. Then it stopped. Silence. Complete silence. I waited another hour before I carefully, quietly moved to one of the side windows and looked down at the stairs. Moonlight illuminated the steel structure. The stairs were empty. No footprints in the light snow that had accumulated on the metal steps. No signs anyone had been there. But I'd heard them, crystal clear. Footsteps and knocking. I didn't sleep much that first night. Just lay in the bunk, listening to every sound, watching the shadows move across the ceiling as clouds passed in front of the moon. When dawn finally came, I radioed Margaret. Tower 9 to base. Request clarification on last night's incident. Over. Base to Tower 9. You followed protocols. Over. Yes, but I need to understand what... You survived your first night. That's what matters. Expect similar incidents to continue throughout winter. Each time, follow the protocols exactly. The rules exist because they work. We don't always know why they work, but they do.
Continue your observations and report any deviations. Over. What's out there, Margaret? What was on my stairs last night? Over. We don't know exactly. Our theories range from wildlife exhibiting unusual behavior to psychological effects of extreme isolation to something more unusual. What matters is that the protocols keep you safe. Trust them. Over and out.
I spent my first week settling into routines and learning to live with the tower's quirks. The wood stove required feeding every 4 hours. The generator ran for 2 hours each evening to charge batteries and power the radio. Water came from melted snow. The toilet was a chemical unit that had to be maintained every 3 days. And every 3 days, I made the trip to the cache per Rule 4. The cache entrance was at the tower's base, a reinforced door set into the hillside leading to an underground room where supplies were kept at stable temperatures. The trail from the tower door down the external stairs across 50 feet of ground and to the cache entrance was clearly marked with orange flags every 10 feet. On my third day, I made my first cache run. It was 2 p.m., full daylight, such as it was in late October, and I'd been watching from the tower for 30 minutes to make sure nothing was moving in the forest. Everything looked clear. I descended the tower stairs, they were real this time, solid metal under my boots, and followed the flagged trail to the cache. The orange markers were exactly where they should be, spaced evenly, leading directly north, just like Rule 5 specified. I was loading supplies from the cache into my pack when I noticed something strange. There were footprints in the snow between the cache and the tree line, fresh prints made within the last few hours based on how sharp the edges were. But they weren't mine. Mine were clearly visible on the trail, coming from the tower. These others came from the forest, approached within about 20 feet of the cache entrance, then returned to the forest. And the tracks were wrong. Too large for human feet. The stride was too long, and they were barefoot. I could see what looked like toes, despite the temperature being around 10 degrees. Rule 7 flashed through my mind. If you see your own footprints leading away from the tower when you haven't left, stay inside and radio for extraction. But these weren't my prints. They were something else's prints. That wasn't covered by the rules. I finished loading my pack quickly and returned to the tower, watching those prints until I was back inside. That evening, I reported them during my routine radio check. Tower 9 to base. Found unusual tracks near the cache today. Not mine, not matching any known wildlife. Over. Base to Tower 9. Did the tracks match any protocol violations? Over. Negative. They came from the forest, not from the tower. Over. Then document and continue observation. Remember Rule 5 about the cache trail. As long as the trail appears normal, you're safe to use it. Over. What about the tracks? Shouldn't we investigate what made them? Over. Negative. Investigation is not part of your duties. Your job is to observe, document, and follow protocols. Leave analysis to us. Over and out. The weeks crawled by. November brought shorter days and longer nights. By mid-month, sunrise wasn't until 10 a.m. and sunset was at 3:30 p.m. That meant over 18 hours of darkness every day. The temperature dropped to 20 below zero, then 30 below. The forest became a frozen, silent place where even the wind sounded muffled. And the incidents continued. Almost every night I'd hear something, sometimes footsteps on the stairs, sometimes knocking on the door. Once I heard scratching on the roof, long, deliberate scrapes like something with claws was testing the metal. Another time, voices calling my name from the forest below, sometimes in my ex-wife's voice, sometimes in my father's voice. My father had been dead for 5 years. Each time I followed the protocols.
Ignored the sounds, didn't open the door, didn't look at the stairs during incidents. And each morning, I'd find no evidence that anything had been there. No footprints, no scratch marks, nothing physical. But I knew it was real. The sounds were too clear, too specific, and the psychological weight of it built up over time. Knowing that every night something would test the tower, try to get me to break protocol, try to make me open the door or look at something I shouldn't see. On December 3rd, I experienced Rule 3 for the first time. I was at my desk doing weather observations around 8 p.m. when I noticed light outside. Not moonlight or starlight, this was different. Blue-white moving through the forest, approaching the tower. Rule 3. If you see lights moving through the forest at night, close all shutters and do not look at them until they pass. I moved quickly, pulling down the shutters on all 6 windows. The cab plunged into darkness, except for the wood stove's glow and a small battery lantern. Then I sat on my bunk and waited.
I could hear them. The lights made sound as they moved, a high-pitched hum, almost musical. They circled the tower slowly, and even with the shutters closed, I could see blue-white light leaking through the cracks, casting strange shadows in the cab. Then they stopped, right outside. The humming intensified, and I felt something I can only describe as pressure. Not physical pressure, but something else, like the air itself was pushing at the tower, trying to find a way in. It lasted 15 minutes. Then the lights moved away, their humming fading into the distance. I waited another 30 minutes before carefully opening one shutter and looking out. The forest was dark again, normal. But in the snow around the tower base, I could see scorch marks, perfect circles, about 3 feet in diameter, where the snow had melted and the ground beneath looked burned. There were 7 of them in a circular pattern around the tower. I documented it with photographs and measurements. That morning, Margaret listened to my report and simply said, "Noted. Continue observations." "Margaret, what are those lights? They burned the ground. They made the air feel wrong." "Over. We've documented similar phenomena at Tower 9 for 40 years. We have theories, but no confirmed explanations. What matters is that you followed protocol and remained safe. The shutters work. Trust them. Over and out." By mid-December, I had settled into a grim acceptance of my situation. Tower 9 was located in a place where normal rules didn't fully apply. Something was out there, maybe multiple somethings, that interacted with the tower and its occupant. The protocols existed to keep whatever it was at bay. But I was also going slightly crazy from isolation. 6 weeks of seeing no other human being, of 18-hour nights, of constant low-level dread. I started talking to myself just to hear a human voice. I rationed my books carefully, reading no more than 1 hour per day to make them last. I exercised obsessively, push-ups, sit-ups, pacing the cab, just to burn nervous energy. And I became obsessed with the radio. Official communications happened on Channel 7. Once per day, I'd check in with base, report weather and any incidents, and receive any updates or instructions. But there were other channels. The radio had 13 channels total, and I'd been explicitly ordered not to use Channel 13. Rule 2. Never switch to Channel 13, even if you hear transmissions there. I'd never heard anything on Channel 13. I'd checked Channels 1 to 12 occasionally, all static. Channel 13 was just another static channel as far as I could tell. So why the specific rule against using it? On December 18th, exactly at midnight, I found out. I was lying in my bunk, not quite asleep, but not fully awake, when the radio crackled. Not Channel 7. The sound was coming from the unit itself, but I wasn't on any channel. The radio was off. Then a voice. "Anyone there? This is Tower 9. Can anyone hear me? I need help." The voice was male, young, desperate, and it was coming from the radio, even though the unit was powered down. I sat up, staring at the radio in the darkness. The voice continued.
Please, if anyone can hear this, I'm lost. I'm so cold. I can see the tower, but I can't reach it. The trail keeps moving. Please help me." Every instinct screamed at me to respond. Someone was in trouble. Someone needed help. That was a human in distress, and I was the only person within 100 miles who could assist. I reached for the radio, turned it on. The voice was clearer now, still male, still desperate. "Thank God, someone's there. Please, I need you to come get me. I'm maybe 100 yards from the tower, but I can't find the stairs. Just come down and guide me, please." My hand was on the channel dial. I started to turn it toward channel 13, where the voice seemed to be coming from. Then I stopped. Rule 2. Never switch to channel 13, even if you hear transmissions there. "Please," the voice begged. "I'm freezing. I'm going to die out here. Just come down. Just help me."
I pulled my hand away from the radio, turned it off, sat in the darkness, listening to that voice continue to beg for help even though the radio was powered down. The voice came from the radio speaker, impossible but real, pleading and desperate. "Why won't you help me?" it asked. "Don't you care? I'm dying out here. Just open the door. Just come down, please." I wrapped my pillow around my head, blocking out the sound. Rule 2. Rule 1. Stay inside. Don't respond. Don't break protocol. The voice continued for 3 hours, begging, pleading, eventually getting angry. "You bastard, I know you can hear me. Why won't you help? What kind of person leaves someone to die? Answer me." Then it changed tactics. The voice became my ex-wife. "David, it's Jennifer. I'm here. I don't know how I got here, but I'm scared. Please help me. Please." Then my father. "Son, it's Dad. I need you. Come find me." Then Thomas Garrett, the previous lookout. "David, it's Tom. I came back. I couldn't stay away, but now I'm trapped out here. You have to help me. You have to open the door." I kept the pillow wrapped around my head until dawn. When the sun finally rose, the voice stopped. I removed the pillow and checked the radio. It was off, just like I'd left it. I turned it on and checked channel 13. Pure static, nothing else. That morning's radio check was subdued. Tower 9 to base. Experienced Rule 2 violation attempt last night. Did not switch to channel 13. Over. Base to Tower 9. Excellent discipline. We've lost 3 lookouts to channel 13 over the years. You did the right thing. Over. What happens if you respond to channel 13? Over. A long pause. Based on the evidence we've recovered, we believe responding to channel 13 compels the lookout to leave the tower. We found their bodies later, sometimes months later, miles from Tower 9. They're always frozen, always appear to have walked willingly into the wilderness. We think channel 13 is some kind of lure, a trap. Over. What sets the trap? What's doing this? Over. We don't know. Continue your observation and maintain protocols. Over and out. Christmas came and went without ceremony. I was alone in a tower in the Alaskan wilderness in the dead of winter, surrounded by things that wanted me to break protocol. It was the worst Christmas of my life, but I was still alive, which I counted as a victory. January brought the deepest cold and the longest nights. Sunrise wasn't until nearly 11 a.m. Sunset came at 2:30 p.m. That left over 20 hours of darkness, 20 hours every day when the protocols mattered most. The incidents intensified. Every night, multiple events, footsteps on the stairs, knocking on the door, lights in the forest, voices on the radio. It felt like whatever was out there was getting more aggressive, more determined. On January 15th, something new happened. I made a routine cache run at 1 p.m. The trail looked normal. Orange flags every 10 feet, running directly north for exactly 200 yards. I reached the cache, loaded my pack with supplies, and started back. Halfway to the tower, I noticed something wrong. There was a fork in the trail. Not a major fork, just a subtle divergence.
The main trail continued toward the tower, marked with orange flags, but there was another path, also marked with orange flags, branching to the northeast. I could see it led to what looked like another structure in the distance, another tower maybe, or a building. Rule 5. If the trail appears to fork or diverge, return to the tower without investigating.
But I paused, staring at that fork, because it hadn't been there 30 minutes ago when I walked to the cache. I was certain of that. The trail had been straight, no branches or forks. And yet now there was clearly a fork, clearly marked, leading to a structure I could see about a quarter mile away through the trees. I took a step toward the fork, just one step, just to get a better look at what that structure was. Then I stopped. Rule 5. Return immediately without investigating. I turned and walked back to the tower, not looking at the fork again. When I reached the cab and looked back at the trail from the window, the fork was gone. The trail ran straight from the tower to the cache just like it was supposed to. No branch, no fork, no distant structure. I reported it that evening. Margaret's response was terse. You followed protocol correctly. The trail illusion is a known phenomenon. Investigation of where the false trail leads has resulted in 2 lookout deaths. Never deviate from the marked trail. Over. Where does it lead? What's at the end of that false trail? Over. We don't know. The lookouts who investigated never returned. We found their bodies eventually, miles from Tower 9, but we never found where that false trail actually goes. Just follow the real trail, David. Ignore anything else. Over and out. By February, I was hanging on by my fingernails. 4 months down, 2 to go. The psychological weight of Tower 9 was crushing. Every night brought new incidents. Every day I wondered if that would be the day I broke protocol, made a mistake, let whatever was out there win. The only thing keeping me going was stubbornness. I'd made it further than most lookouts. Only 6 others had completed the full 6-month rotation. I wanted to be the 7th. I wanted to prove I could last. And I wanted that $15,000 completion bonus. But the tower was wearing me down in ways I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just the incidents. It was the cumulative effect of isolation, darkness, and constant vigilance. I started having vivid dreams where I'd leave the tower and follow one of those false trails. In the dreams, I'd find myself walking through the forest, perfectly calm, following my own footprints or lights in the distance, and I'd wake up in a panic, checking the door locks, making sure I was still inside, still safe. The dreams became more frequent and more vivid. Sometimes I'd wake up standing at the door with my hand on the lock, having slept-walked to the exit without conscious thought. That terrified me more than any of the external incidents. What if I slept-walked out of the tower during the night? What if whatever was out there could somehow influence my subconscious mind? I started tying a rope from my ankle to the bunk frame before sleeping. It was uncomfortable and made it hard to rest properly, but at least if I tried to sleepwalk, the rope would wake me before I got far. On February 10th, I woke at 3 a.m. to find the rope had been untied. Not broken, untied. Someone or something had carefully undone the knots while I slept. I was still in my bunk, still inside the tower, but the rope lay coiled on the floor beside me, and I had no memory of untying it. I reported it that morning, my voice shaking slightly as I described what happened. Margaret's response was immediate and serious. David, this is a critical development. Whatever's out there is attempting more sophisticated methods to get you outside. From this point forward, implement the following additional precautions. Barricade the door before sleeping. Keep a battery alarm on your person that will sound if you move more than 10 feet from your bunk, and do not trust your own memory in the mornings. Check for signs that you may have left the tower.
boot prints in the snow, disturbed door locks, anything unusual. You're saying it can make me do things? Make me forget? Over. We've had 2 previous cases where lookouts reported similar experiences. Both survived, but both described periods of missing time or actions they couldn't remember taking. We believe whatever exists near Tower 9 has limited ability to influence human behavior, particularly during sleep. The protocols help resist this influence, but you need to be extra vigilant now. Over. From that night forward, I implemented Margaret's suggestions. I wedged a chair under the door handle before bed. I wore a small motion alarm clipped to my shirt that would screech if I moved beyond the bunk area. I kept a log each morning, documenting everything about the previous night to check for gaps in my memory. The precautions helped, but they also increased my paranoia. I was essentially guarding myself against myself, treating my own mind as potentially compromised. The psychological toll was immense. On February 22nd, exactly at midnight, I experienced the final protocol warning, Rule 7. I woke from an uneasy sleep to the sound of something outside, movement in the snow. I went to the window and looked down at the ground around the tower base, illuminated by moonlight. Footprints in the snow. My footprints. I recognized the tread pattern of my boots, but they led away from the tower, heading into the forest.
Rule 7. If you see your own footprints leading away from the tower when you haven't left, stay inside and radio for immediate extraction. My stomach dropped, because I hadn't left the tower. I'd been inside since yesterday afternoon. It was now midnight. Those prints couldn't be mine, but they were. Exact match to my boots, and they led from the tower stairs across the snow into the forest toward the northeast, the same direction that false trail had led when it appeared. I grabbed the radio. Tower 9 to base. Emergency. Rule 7 violation observed. Request immediate extraction. Over. The response was immediate. Margaret must have been monitoring. Base to Tower 9. Confirm Rule 7 violation. Describe exactly what you're seeing. Over. My footprints in snow leading from tower into forest. I have not left the tower. Prints are fresh, made within last few hours. Over. Understood. Emergency extraction authorized. Weather permitting, flight will arrive at first light, approximately 0900 hours. Until then, remain inside the tower. Do not investigate the footprints. Do not leave under any circumstances. Acknowledge. Over. Acknowledged. Remaining inside. Over. David. Margaret's voice changed, became less official. You've done incredibly well. You've lasted longer than almost anyone. Just hold on for 9 more hours. Keep the door locked. Follow all other protocols. Whatever made those prints is trying to draw you out. Don't give it what it wants. Over. Understood. Tower 9, over and out. I spent the next 9 hours in absolute terror, because every 30 minutes I'd look out the window and see more prints. They formed a path from the tower into the forest, and each time I looked, the path was longer, like something was making the footprints in real time, creating a trail for me to follow. And I heard my own voice calling from the forest, my voice saying my name, calling me to follow the prints, to come into the trees, to see what was waiting there. David, my voice called. Come on, David, it's safe. Just come down, just follow the trail. There's something you need to see. Rule 1, never leave the tower between sunset and sunrise. I stayed inside. Around 3 a.m., the knocking started. On the door, patient, rhythmic, exactly like that first night back in October. Knock, knock, knock. And my voice from outside. Come on, David, open the door. It's just me. You can trust yourself, right? Just open the door. I sat on my bunk,
hands pressed over my ears, reciting the protocols over and over like a mantra. Never leave the tower at night, never switch to channel 13, never look at the lights, never investigate the false trail, never respond to knocking without confirmation, never follow footprints that shouldn't exist. At 5 a.m., the knocking stopped, the voice stopped, but the footprints remained, clearly visible in the moonlight, leading from my tower into the dark forest. At 9:07 a.m., I heard the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard, an aircraft engine. Frank's bush plane circling the tower, looking for a safe place to land on the small strip. I grabbed my essential gear, radio, emergency pack, critical documents, and prepared to leave. Through the window, I could see the footprints were still there. In daylight, they looked even more wrong. They were my footprints, exact match, but they led to and from the tower, like something had walked from the forest to my door, then back, wearing my boots, or somehow creating my exact footprint pattern. Frank landed and taxied as close as he could. I saw him jump out and start walking toward the tower, then stop. He was staring at the footprints. The radio crackled. "David, this is Frank. I'm seeing your tracks leading from the tower toward the trees. Did you make those?" "Negative. That's why I'm extracting. Rule 7 violation." "Jesus. Okay, here's what we're doing. I'm coming to the base of the tower. You come down fast and we go directly to the plane. Don't look at the forest. Don't follow those tracks. Just straight to the plane. You understand?" "Understood."
I unlocked the tower door for the first time in 4 months and descended the stairs. Frank met me at the bottom, his rifle unslung and ready. Together, we walked quickly to the plane, not looking at the footprints, not investigating where they led. As we taxied for takeoff, I looked back at Tower 9 one last time. The tower stood alone in the wilderness, surrounded by forest, with that impossible trail of footprints leading from it into the trees. And standing at the forest edge, barely visible between the spruce trees, I saw a figure. Too far away to make out details, but it was watching the plane, watching me leave. Frank saw it too. "Don't look at it," he muttered. "Just don't look." We took off, climbing into the gray February sky, leaving Tower 9 behind. As we gained altitude, I looked down at the forest, and I could see it, a path through the trees, leading from where those footprints ended, going deeper into the wilderness, going to something I couldn't quite make out from the air, something that looked like a structure but wrong somehow, too angular, too organized, something that shouldn't be there. "What is that?" I asked Frank, pointing. He glanced down, then quickly looked away. "Nobody knows. It's not on any maps. It's not supposed to exist. But every winter, lookouts at Tower 9 see things that try to lead them there. Nobody who's followed those false trails has ever come back. Whatever's there, it wants visitors. It tries to lure them in. And if you'd followed those footprints last night," he didn't need to finish. I understood. We flew to Fairbanks in silence. When we landed, Margaret was waiting with the Forest Service medical team. They checked me over. Physically, I was fine, just undernourished and exhausted. Psychologically, they said I showed signs of extreme stress and isolation effects, but nothing that wouldn't heal with time. Margaret pulled me aside after the medical check. "You lasted 6 months, David. That's remarkable. You followed every protocol correctly, including the final one. That takes discipline most people don't have." "What's out there, Margaret, really? What was trying to get me to follow those footprints?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Honestly, we don't know. The Forest Service has been studying Tower 9 for decades. We have theories, some kind of spatial anomaly, some predatory intelligence that exists in that specific area, some natural phenomenon that mimics intelligence to lure prey, but we don't know definitively." Those footprints were mine. Exact match. How is that possible? We've documented similar phenomena. Whatever exists near Tower 9 can create convincing copies of things, footprints, voices, even visual appearances. It learns from observing the lookouts. It tries to exploit their psychology. The protocols exist because they're the patterns that have kept people alive. They interrupt whatever process this thing uses to lure victims. Has anyone ever completed a full 6-month rotation after a Rule 7? No. You're the first to survive Rule 7. Usually when we see those footprints, by the time we get there for extraction, the lookout is gone. We find them later, miles into the wilderness, frozen, like they walked out following their own prints and just kept walking until they died.
She handed me an envelope. Your completion bonus. You didn't quite finish the full 6 months, but you lasted 4 months and demonstrated exceptional protocol discipline. The Forest Service considers that a successful rotation. I opened the envelope. $15,000, the full bonus. We're also offering you a position, Margaret continued, training new lookouts. You understand the protocols better than almost anyone. You've experienced the phenomena firsthand. You could help prepare others. Will Tower 9 have another lookout this winter? We're trying to recruit now. It's difficult. The reputation precedes the posting. But yes, someone will be up there from October to March. Someone always is. The tower needs to be manned. Why? Why maintain a lookout in a place like that? What's the actual purpose? Margaret looked out at the mountains beyond Fairbanks. Because whatever exists near Tower 9 needs to be monitored. Because if we abandon the tower, if we stop providing a predictable human presence with established protocols, we don't know what will happen. Maybe it would stay contained. Maybe it would expand its territory. Maybe it would find new ways to interact with humans. The tower isn't just a fire lookout, David. It's a containment measure. A way to give that thing what it wants, human observation, human presence, while keeping it in one place and protecting the observers with protocols. We're feeding it. In a sense, yes, but we're feeding it under controlled conditions. That's better than the alternative. I spent 2 weeks in Fairbanks, decompressing, talking to Forest Service psychologists, writing detailed reports of every incident I had experienced. The psychologists were particularly interested in the sleepwalking episode and the untied rope. They theorized that whatever existed at Tower 9 had some form of low-level psychic or hypnotic influence that grew stronger over prolonged exposure. Think of it like radiation, the psychologist explained. Short exposure, you're fine, but the longer you're exposed, the more it accumulates in your system. The protocols act as shielding, but they're not perfect. 4 months is about the limit for most people before the psychological defenses start breaking down. Then why ask anyone to stay 6 months? Because we're always hoping someone can make it. Someone with the right combination of discipline, psychological resilience, and maybe just luck. We need the full winter data. We need to understand how this thing behaves over the complete seasonal cycle.
After 2 weeks, I flew back to Seattle, collected my payment, and tried to return to normal life. But normal life felt wrong after Tower 9. The city was too crowded, too loud, too bright. I'd spent 4 months in isolation, in darkness, in constant low-level fear. Coming back to civilization was jarring. And I couldn't stop thinking about those footprints, about that figure at the forest edge watching me leave, about the structure I'd seen from the air that shouldn't exist. I tried to settle back into regular life. I rented an apartment, looked for work, reconnected with a few friends, but at night I'd dream about the tower, about the forest, about voices calling my name in the darkness.
3 months later, I got a call from Margaret. "David, we have a problem. The winter lookout at Tower 9. We recruited a guy with 15 years of remote posting experience. He lasted 2 weeks, requested emergency extraction after experiencing all 7 protocol violations in succession over a single 72-hour period. He's not doing well psychologically, currently in psychiatric care in Anchorage." I'm sorry to hear that. We need someone for the rest of the winter rotation, March through May, just the final 10 weeks. Someone who knows the protocols, who's proven they can handle the pressure. The pay would be $25,000 for 10 weeks. And David, I know you said you'd never go back, but you're one of only 7 people to ever last more than 3 months at Tower 9. You understand that place better than almost anyone. I should have said no, should have recognized that going back was insane, but some part of me needed to understand, needed to know what was really out there, needed to finish what I'd started. "I'll do it," I heard myself say, "but I want full access to all historical records, every incident, every theory, every piece of data you have about Tower 9 and that structure in the forest." "Done. We'll have a complete data dump ready for you. When can you leave?" "Give me 3 days to prepare." So I went back. On March 3rd, Frank flew me out to Tower 9 for the second time. As we approached, I could see the tower standing alone in the endless white forest, and I felt a strange mixture of dread and familiarity. This place had nearly broken me, but it had also become part of me in some fundamental way. "You sure about this?" Frank asked as we circled for landing. "Nobody's ever done a return rotation before. We don't know how the thing out there will respond to someone coming back." "I'm sure."
The tower was exactly as I'd left it. My personal items were still there, packed in boxes. The protocols were still posted on the wall. The wood stove was cold, but functional. It felt like coming home to a haunted house. That first night back, I waited for the incidents to start, for the footsteps, the knocking, the voices. But nothing happened. The night was completely silent. No sounds from outside, no lights in the forest, nothing. It was somehow more unsettling than the constant activity I'd experienced before. On my second night, around midnight, I heard a single knock on the door, just one, then silence. I didn't respond, Protocol 6, but I felt like something was testing me, seeing if I remembered the rules, checking if I was the same person who'd left, or if I'd forgotten the lessons learned. By the third night, the incidents resumed in full force, but they were different now, more focused, more intelligent. Instead of random attempts to lure me out, they felt coordinated, like whatever was out there had learned from my previous stay and was trying new tactics. The voice on Channel 13 didn't just beg for help anymore. It engaged in conversation, trying to build rapport. "David, I know you can hear me. I'm not trying to trick you. I just want to talk. Don't you get lonely up there? Don't you want someone to talk to?" The footsteps on the stairs came at different times now, not just late at night. Sometimes at dusk, sometimes just before dawn, testing if I'd grown complacent with the schedule. And the false trail appeared more frequently. Every other cache run, I'd see it, that fork in the path, those orange flags leading to that distant structure. And each time it appeared, it looked more real, more convincing, more like somewhere I should investigate. But I followed the protocols, every single time. I spent my days reviewing the historical data Margaret had sent, decades of reports, theories, and investigations, and I started to see patterns that previous analysts had missed. The incidents at Tower 9 weren't random.
They followed cycles. Every 7 to 10 years, there would be a spike in activity. More aggressive attempts, more protocol violations, more lookouts requesting extraction. These spikes seemed to correlate with geological activity in the region, minor earthquakes,
where the boundary between the physical world and the spirit world was thin, where offerings had to be made to appease the things that lived between. The Forest Service had inadvertently continued this tradition by manning the tower. We were the offerings, human presence, human observation, human consciousness. That's what the thing wanted. That's what kept it satisfied and contained. But the historical data also revealed something darker. In the early years before the protocols were established, lookouts had disappeared at a much higher rate. Between 1950 and 1970, 11 lookouts had vanished, all in winter, all without explanation. It wasn't until 1973 that the Forest Service started seriously investigating. That's when they found the first body, a lookout named Robert Chen, who disappeared in 1971. His body was found 15 miles from Tower 9, perfectly preserved in the permafrost, and when they examined him, they found something impossible. His footprints leading to the body were his own, but they came from two different directions. One set approached from Tower 9, showing his final walk into the wilderness. The other set approached from deeper in the forest, from the direction of that unmapped structure. Both sets were his boots, his stride, his exact footprint pattern. It was as if Robert Chen had walked out from the tower to meet himself coming from the forest. The two trails converged at the spot where his body was found. After that discovery, the Forest Service established the 7 protocols, and the death rate dropped dramatically. Lookouts still struggled, many requested early extraction, but very few actually died. I was reading through these reports late one night when I heard something new. Not footsteps, or knocking, or voices. Music. Faint, distant, coming from the forest. It sounded like old folk songs, the kind my grandmother used to sing. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, drifting through the trees on the night wind. This wasn't covered by any protocol. There was no rule about music in the forest. I went to the window and listened. The song continued, rising and falling, and I found myself wanting to open the door, to step outside and find the source. Not because someone was out there playing music, but because the song itself was compelling. It pulled at something deep inside me. I grabbed the radio. Tower 9 to base. Reporting new phenomenon. Music in the forest, not covered by existing protocols. Over. Static. Then Margaret's voice, but she sounded worried. David, describe the music. Over. Folk songs. Old melodies, very compelling. I want to investigate the source. Over. Do not investigate. This is a new development. We've never documented music before. Stay inside. Close all windows. Do not listen to the music. Over. I followed her instructions, closing and latching all the windows, but I could still hear it, muffled but present. That beautiful, impossible music drifting through the Alaskan night. It played for 3 hours, and when it finally stopped, I felt an inexplicable sense of loss, like something precious had been taken away. The next morning, Margaret's tone was grave during our check-in. David, the music is a significant escalation. Whatever's out there has never used auditory lures beyond voices before. It's adapting, learning. We need you to document everything about these musical incidents. Time, duration, type of music, your emotional response. This could be important. Margaret, I have a theory. What if this thing isn't just some mindless predator? What if it's intelligent in ways we don't understand? What if it's been trying to communicate and the protocols have prevented actual dialogue? A long silence. David, I understand the isolation is affecting you, but you need to remember 3 people are dead because they tried to communicate with whatever's out there. The protocols exist to prevent interaction, not enable it. Your job is to observe and survive, nothing more. But what if we're missing an opportunity? What if... End of discussion. Follow the protocols. Make it through the next 7 weeks, collect your pay, and come home. Do not deviate. Over and out. But I couldn't let it go, because the more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that we'd been approaching Tower 9 all wrong. We'd been treating it like a siege, like humans defending against some hostile force. But what if that force wasn't hostile? What if it was just different? What if it had been trying to reach out, to make contact, and our fear had prevented any real understanding? The music came again the next night, and the night after that. Each time, different songs. Sometimes folk melodies, sometimes classical pieces, sometimes songs I recognized from my childhood, songs my mother used to play. How could it know these songs? How could it reach into my memories and pull out music that had meaning to me? Unless it was reading my mind, unless it had access to my thoughts and memories, unless the prolonged exposure to its influence had created some kind of connection. On March 20th, 3 weeks into my rotation return, I made a decision that I knew might cost me everything. I was going to break protocol. Not all of them, not recklessly, but I needed to test something. I needed to know if communication was possible. That night, when the music started, I did something I'd never done before. I opened one window, just a crack, just enough to hear the music clearly, and I listened. The melody was beautiful, haunting. It reminded me of summer evenings when I was a child, sitting on my grandmother's porch while she hummed old songs. It reminded me of peace, of safety, of home. We were making music together, me and whatever was out there in the darkness. I know how this sounds. I know it seems like I'd lost my mind, that the isolation had finally broken me. Maybe it had, but in that moment, humming along with impossible music in an Alaskan forest, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Connection. The music continued for an hour, a conversation in melody. I'd hum a phrase and it would respond. It would introduce a new theme and I'd follow. We were communicating in a language older than words. When it finally ended, I felt exhilarated and terrified in equal measure. I'd broken protocol. I'd interacted with the thing, and I had no idea what consequences that might bring. I didn't report it to Margaret. How could I? She'd order immediate extraction, or worse, she'd think I'd been compromised, mentally broken by the isolation. But the next night, something changed. When the footsteps came on the stairs, they were slower, gentler, less like something trying to trick me, and more like something requesting entrance. When the knocking came, it was different too, not the insistent, patient knocking of before. This was questioning, polite almost, like asking permission rather than demanding access. I sat in the darkness, listening to these changed sounds, and wondered what I'd done. Had I opened a door that should have stayed closed? Or had I finally started a real dialogue with whatever shared this space with me? On March 23rd, I made my next cash run. The trail was clear, no false forks. But when I reached the cache and opened the door, I found something impossible. Fresh food. Not Forest Service supplies. Fresh vegetables, bread, dried meat. Things that shouldn't exist in a cache that was only resupplied every 6 weeks. I stood there, staring at the impossible food, trying to understand. Was this a gift? An offering? Or a trap? I didn't take it.
Rule 4 said food must be stored in the cache, but it didn't say anything about mysterious food appearing in the cache. That felt like dangerous territory. But I did something else. I left something of my own. A small carving I'd been working on during my isolation. A bird carved from a piece of scrap wood. Just a simple thing, but I'd put time and care into it.
I placed it on the shelf next to the mysterious food and left. The next morning, the carved bird was gone, and in its place was something else. A stone, polished smooth, with markings I didn't recognize carved into its surface. The markings looked ancient, deliberate, meaningful. We were trading gifts, me and the thing in the forest. I know this was insane. I know I'd crossed lines that every protocol warned against, but I couldn't stop. Because for the first time since arriving at Tower 9, I didn't feel like prey being stalked. I felt like I was having a conversation with something that wanted to be understood. Over the next 2 weeks, the exchanges continued. I'd leave small items, another carving, a sketch I'd drawn, a page of writing. Each time I'd find something in return. Stones with carvings, bundles of dried plants. Once, a perfectly preserved bird's nest, intricate and beautiful. The nightly incidents became less aggressive. The music came every evening now, and we'd create melodies together. The knocking was gentle, almost friendly. The lights in the forest would appear, but they'd dance rather than menace. It felt like whatever was out there was pleased, happy even, if such a word could apply to something so alien. But I knew this couldn't last. My rotation was ending in 2 weeks. Margaret would send Frank to extract me, and then what? Would another lookout come, one who followed the protocols strictly? Would that anger the thing? Would we lose this fragile connection we'd built? On April 10th, with 1 week left in my rotation, I made the biggest decision of all. I left the tower at night. Not in response to lures or footprints or voices. This was my choice. I grabbed a flashlight, unlocked the door, and descended the stairs into the frozen night. Rule 1: never leave the tower between sunset and sunrise. I was breaking the first and most fundamental protocol. The temperature was well below zero. The stars were brilliant in the clear sky. My breath crystallized in the air, and I stood at the base of the tower, waiting. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then I heard movement in the trees, something large, approaching slowly. I should have been terrified, but I wasn't. This felt right, like the conclusion to a conversation that had been building for weeks. It emerged from the tree line. Not human, not animal, something else entirely. It was tall, maybe 8 feet, and its form seemed to shift in the moonlight, like it didn't have a fixed shape. Sometimes it looked almost human. Sometimes it looked like it was made of shadow and starlight. Sometimes it was just a presence, a distortion in the air. We stood there, facing each other across 50 feet of snow, and I understood. This thing wasn't a predator. It was a guardian, something ancient that lived in this place, that had been here long before humans, that would be here long after we were gone. The tower had been built in its territory. The lookouts were intruders, but also, in a strange way, we were company, connection, something to interact with in the endless isolation of the deep forest. It had been trying to communicate all along. The footsteps, the voices, the lights, those weren't attacks. They were attempts at contact. But the protocols had interpreted them as threats, creating a hostile dynamic that didn't need to exist. I don't know how long we stood there. Time felt strange, stretched and compressed simultaneously, but eventually it turned and moved back into the forest. Not retreating, just returning home. And I climbed back up to the tower, knowing that everything had changed. I didn't tell Margaret about leaving the tower, didn't report the gift exchanges or the music collaboration or the face-to-face encounter. When Frank arrived for my extraction on April 17th, I simply packed my gear and left. "How was it?" he asked as we flew toward Fairbanks. "Get through okay?" "It was fine," I said. "Quiet, actually. Fewer incidents than my first rotation." He seemed surprised but pleased. "Maybe the thing's getting used to people? Maybe it's calming down." "Maybe," I agreed, but I knew the truth. It hadn't calmed down. We'd just finally learned to coexist. Margaret was waiting in Fairbanks with my payment, $25,000 for 10 weeks of work. Combined with my previous payment, I'd made over $60,000 for my time at Tower 9. "You did it," she said, shaking my hand. "First person to ever complete a return rotation. How do you feel?" "Different," I said honestly. "The tower changes you." "It does," she said, studying my face. "Are you interested in returning next winter, full 6-month rotation?" I thought about the thing in the forest, about the connection we'd built, about the possibility of real understanding between two species that had spent decades in mutual fear. "Yes," I said, "I'll come back." And I will. This October, I'm returning to Tower 9 for my 3rd rotation. But this time, I'm not going as a besieged lookout following protocols to survive. I'm going as something else. An ambassador, maybe. A bridge between the human world and whatever exists in that thin place where boundaries blur. I know this probably sounds insane. I know the Forest Service would be horrified if they knew what I'd done, the protocols I'd broken. But I also know that 40 years of fear and defensive protocols hadn't led to understanding. Maybe it's time for a different approach. Maybe it's time to stop seeing Tower 9 as a containment measure and start seeing it as an opportunity, a chance to learn from something truly alien, something that's been trying to talk to us for decades, if only we'd been willing to listen. So, that's my story. That's what I learned during 6 months split across 2 winters in the Alaskan wilderness. The protocols work if your goal is pure survival. But if your goal is understanding, if you're willing to take carefully calculated risks, there might be another way. This October, I'll find out if I'm right, if the connection I built was real, if peaceful coexistence is possible with something that exists outside our normal understanding of the world. And if I'm wrong, if breaking protocols was the biggest mistake I could have made, well, I guess I'll become another cautionary tale in the Tower 9 logs. Another lookout who thought he was smarter than 40 years of hard-learned rules. But I don't think I'm wrong. I think we've been afraid of the wrong things. I think the real danger at Tower 9 was never the thing in the forest. It was our refusal to see it as anything other than a threat. Sometimes the monsters aren't what they seem. Sometimes they're just trying to say hello. And sometimes, in the frozen darkness of an Alaskan winter, the bravest thing you can do